Good morning. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be making some apples. We're just going to can them up. I've got about 3 5-gallon buckets sitting here in the kitchen full of apples, and I've got 2 trees sitting outside that are packed. This morning I'm using a tool from Pampered Chef to peel, core, and slice my apples. You notice it's quite efficient. Sometimes there's just a little bit of the core left. I use my apple core just to pinch that off in there. Take a knife, give it a cut, and I'm left with just some little apple slices. Alright, there's a little release lever here. Just push it down, pull the handle, pull the core off. Take a fresh, clean apple, pop it on, give it a good push to get it up to the peeling mechanism, crank away. That's all it takes. Then you have, slide your apple off. There's a little bit of peeling left on the bottom and on the top. I've got chickens, so none of that's going to go to waste. But it cuts your apple into this nice little rings. Pretty cool, huh? That's why I take the knife, give it a good cut. Then I have the apple sitting in some ascorbic acid over here. I think that's what it's called anyhow. Also goes by the name of Fruit Fresh. Prevents browning and preserves the flavor. So, I've got a little bit of a mess. Take these. This is my little scrap bucket. I can either use this to make apple cider vinegar or pectin, or just give it to my chickens, which that's probably where to wind up, to be honest. Then I've got my apples that I've been cutting up here. But some things about my little handy dandy apple peeler core slicer. It comes with a red handle, which is a thinner slice. I prefer the thicker slice, which is the green one. So that's what I use most of the time. If you just want to cut and slice the apple, rock this little puppy back. When you're cranking, it'll cut and slice it. If you just want to peel it, this little thing here has a little nut down here. You just loosen that. This folds away. It does make a little bit of a mess. So there's a rag on my floor. But the amount of time it saves me is amazing. I also have a little stand that I can set it on. So if I don't want to attach it to my countertop. But I've got some apples that I've had in the cooker for 20 minutes. I'll explain all that here in a little bit. But it's time for me to take the lid off, turn my timer off, and move them to the side. Because in order to keep your canned goods from, I gotta find someplace to put the lid, from siphoning, after you've finished boiling them, and I mean it's a good rolling boil, you have to let them set for 5 minutes before you remove them from the pot. That gives the temperature in the pot time to cool down a little bit. Oops. Well, there we go. Start my timer. Okay. Anyhow, that gives time in the pot to cool down. It lets the stuff that's in the jars actually stop boiling within the jar, so that when you pull it out, it doesn't siphon and continue to boil and ruin your seal, bubble all over your counter. It's just a good thing to do. Alright, we've got our apples peeled, we've got them sliced, so now I'm going to put them into a pot, add a little bit of water, and got to boil them for 5 minutes. What that does is it brings the air out of the fruit and keeps it from floating. If you don't do that, it's not going to be a problem, but it helps kill the bacteria within it. It brings out all the air bubbles, so all your fruit can pack in there a little tighter, looks nicer, tastes better. Good thing to do. So, let me grab my apples, and we'll get them into this pot. As you can tell, I've done quite a few this morning. A lot of canning is a hands-on procedure. And I wash my hands a lot when I'm canning. Even if I have gloves on, I will wash the gloves. The main reason I wear gloves when I'm doing a lot of stuff like this is my hands will tend to get sore. My fingers will get swelled up like a old man at a swimming pool. So, I've got my apples in there. I'm going to add a little bit of my fresh fruit into the pot, and that'll keep these from turning brown when they're in the jar, because nobody likes a brown apple. So I'm going to add some water in here to cover them up a little bit, get them on the stove, and we'll start them boiling. Alright, it's been 5 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pull these out. These were actually quart jars. With these apples, I actually used a different Pampered Chef product. I used this. I peeled them by hand, but then used this to core and slice them. It all depends on what type of apples you're wanting for whatever project you're going to be using them for. Sometimes I like a heftier apple for like a cobbler or just to snack on. So, I've got those apples over there boiling. I've got these that are now cooling. And they'll sit there for 24 hours. Here in a little bit you'll start hearing them ping, which is amazing. That's like one of the best sounds ever to hear as a canner. One thing you need to know, if you visit someone that lives on a homestead or has a tendency to do some canning, during the month of July, definitely the month of August, on into September, you are going to walk into a world of organized chaos. My garden is producing right now by leaps and bounds. I thought for a while it was going to just be an unsuccessful year, but let me show you. This is zucchini, cucumbers, and green beans from yesterday. This is two. This is two. This is a basket of okra. And this is some peppers, some tomatoes. I've got to do something with all of that today, because tomorrow I'm going to have just as much, if not more. But as you can tell from this pile, this is not yesterday, but the day before. That's the zucchini from there. I have been getting a lot of it processed. I've got pickles, more pickles. I've got zesty bread and butter, 14-day sweet pickles, some more zesty bread and butter, some candied jalapenos, some dill pickles, some garlic dill pickles, some kosher dill pickles. Then I've got more pickles. But I've also got some apple butter, some cherry jam. I've got 14-day sweet pickles cooking in here. It's not necessarily cooking because they are a fermented pickle, so they take 14 days and you do something a little different to them each day. I've got honey that I need to get bottled up because I extracted some honey from our bees. There's always work to be done, and there's always something to do. So I've got jars here that I've cleaned and sterilized. They will all need to be heated. I use the big pot, boil them in there for a little bit, which is actually what I'm going to do to some of these because I need to use them for those. Did you hear it? One of them popped. It's so nice. I like it. But I've got more apples here. Got a little bowl of watermelon seeds over there that Chelsea's decided she needs to save for next year. I've got more jars that need to be labeled. I've got more apples need to be peeled. So, while these are boiling, I'm going to get to peeling some more. And then, that way they can set in the ascorbic acid so that once I get these put in jars, I can get these started boiling, keep the cycle going. So, these are starting to get a little bit of foam on them, you notice, which is good. As soon as they actually start boiling though, I'll start the timer, let them boil for 5 minutes. But we'll get all this extra air out of them so that they won't float up in my jars. So, I'll be right back. Alright, got the apples boiled, 5 minutes. They're nice and hot. Move some of this stuff out of my way. Move some of this out of my way. Did you hear it? Another jar popped. So exciting. I'm going to take my lids and rings, set them down in this boiling water for a minute so that they can get sterilized. Then I'm going to take these jars, handy dandy little funnel. Now these apples you'll want to fill up to this bottom line. Give it a 1-inch head space, and then we'll backfill it with the juice for 1/2-inch head space. So I got my funnel, got my spoon. Then you have this handy dandy little jar tool. It actually has a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, 1 inch marker right on it. This end is good for packing, debubbling. Use it to slide all around the edges. Use it to push that fruit down in there real good. Got to get the fruit down past the shoulders. Backfill with a little juice. Check to make sure our measurements are right, spot on. Then you'll take a wash rag, pull my lids and rings out, use the wash rag, wipe off any excess along there. Place on a nice clean lid and the rings. And we'll go finger tight. You don't want to go any tighter than that because when you put it into the pot, it's actually going to boil the insides of here, and it's going to force all this extra air out of this lid. And then once it starts to cool, it'll compress and make it pop. So that's as good as that's going to get for this jar. And let me finish the rest. Alright, I've done a couple jars. Didn't think you'd want to watch it all. But I'll show you something. Getting down to the last little bits. And I don't want to try to use a spoon to get them out. So I have this new Pampered Chef product. It actually comes in super handy. I can scoop up all these. It strains it out. Would you look at that? Would you look at that? Alright, let me finish gathering the rest of these into this jar so I can top it off with some juice. Voila! That's all of those bad boys. Alright. Use my little tool. Give them a little poke. Get them down under that shoulder. Grab the ladle. Now I'll show you something. If you notice, you take this and you go along here. See them little extra bubbles that are coming out? That's what this tool is for. Use it, get down in there, tell them bubbles to come on out. Because those bubbles will actually change your head space, which is up here. If you don't get them all out and you put your lid on, it'll actually drop your head space, and you want it to be, I mean, a few bubbles are okay, but as you can tell, I've got quite a few in there, and it actually lowered my head space down to 1 inch, and I actually only want it at 1/2 inch at this point. So do that, pop that on, add a little more of the juice. Voila. Wipe off my rim, making sure to get any little apple bits off of there. Slap on a lid, finger tighten the ring. That's it. Now I put my lid back on over here and peek. It's not quite boiling yet, so we'll give that just a minute to come up to temperature. Then I'm going to put these jars in and let them boil for 20 minutes. That'll help kill any bacterias in there. It'll help boil the stuff that's in the jars and help them seal. Again, these are just a plain simple apple canned with water. There's no syrup mix in it. There's no cinnamon. There's no spices whatsoever. It'll just be a plain apple in an apple juice, which you can use then for making any dessert you want. You can add whatever you want to it after you open the jar, or you just eat them just like that. The recipe I'm using is a USDA method for canning home apple slices. It has apples and water, and you take try to set that down there. Fire over there. Alright. Wipe the jar, boil them for 5 minutes, and wipe the jar lids, put the lids on. Process in a water bath or steam canner or pressure canner. So this is a multi-use recipe. Water bath, steam canner, either size jars, pint or quart is 20 minutes. Increased time as needed for your altitude. Pressure canner, either size jar is 8 minutes. 5 pounds weighted gauge, 6 pounds dial gauge, and again, adjust your pressure for your altitude. So the recipe can be found at healthycanning.com. I just printed it off the internet. I Google a lot of things, whatever I want to use. I just enter in what I want to do, and then Google says, hey, this is how you do it. So I peeled a few more apples while I was waiting. While this is coming up to a boil. Actually, I think it is boiling. So I'll go ahead and stick these in there. Grab your little handy dandy jar tongs. Set them down into the water. I try to evenly space them. When you're canning, you want to have something underneath your jars. You do not want your jar sitting directly onto the bottom of the pot because it can cause it to crack and break. I have a jar rack in there. But if you notice, these are actually bubbles escaping from this jar of apples already. When it's boiling, that's what it's going to do. It's going to force that air out of the jars and create a vacuum inside of it, and then it'll seal. So, watch the pot never boils, although I like seeing them bubble. Pots boil better with the lid on. So put the lid on. Once I hear it boiling again in there, which shouldn't take very long, I'll set my timer, and then once the timer's up, I'll move them off the burner, take the lid off, let it come down in temperature for about 5 minutes. That allows everything in the jar to stop boiling, to calm down, so that when I take it out of the canner, it doesn't continue to boil on my counter and boil out of the jar. It's called siphoning, but you don't want that. It's not any good. It'll actually suck down a lot of stuff in your jar. It's debatable on whether or not it's edible at that point. Some people say it's just fine. Other people say stick it in the fridge. So, I want these jars to last a long time. I'm going to let them cool. Then I'll move them out. And I'll be back to show you how to do all that. Alright, I'm back. In the 10 minutes it took for these to boil, now they've cooled. I need to pull them out and put them over here. I was able to peel this many more apples using my Pampered Chef tool. Some of them, sometimes if you notice, the seed will get a little close to the apple part. When I pull it off of there, I'll just take this apple core, slide it down inside the hole. It's another Pampered Chef product. Take the little bits I pour out, put it over there. So it's not always perfect, but it makes it quicker, because that's another 4 or 5 pints. There we go. These are done. Pull them out. We'll start hearing them ting here in a minute. But really, that's all there is to canning. It's not hard. It is intimidating if you haven't ever done it, because there's this word that people like to use when they talk about canning your own stuff. It's a B word. I'm not going to say it because I don't have a problem with it. Hasn't happened, and I try to make sure everything is clean, sterile, hands washed, gloves washed, because like I said, I wear my gloves a lot just to keep my fingers from swelling up. But that's it. So far this morning we've done 3 quarts, 4 pints. I've got at least another 4 or 5 pints in there ready to go. I've got just a few apples left out of that first 5-gallon bucket, but I've got 2 more buckets to do. So the chickens are going to be happy, and so is my family. If you liked my video, please like and subscribe. And if you want to hit the notification bell, you can be notified anytime I upload another video. Also, don't forget all the wonderful Pampered Chef products that I used today. My friend Verna Womack, I'll add a link to her page down at the bottom. I'm sure she'll be willing to hook you up with anything you need. Again, thanks for watching. See you next time.